This is Stephanie Mann from SafeKidsNow.com. And many people in our society are abused. 1 in 4 women are in domestic violence situations. Rebecca Kimball, who is with us right now, grew up in a culture of abuse where all the women are abused. So this is one story, her story, that she's telling today about her abuse. Rebecca, please tell us what happened to you.
I was born and raised in an FLDS polygamous cult. In our religion, women and children literally belong to the men, their property. They not only belong to the men, but the women are breeding stock, because the women are to become those that populate the man's world when he becomes a god, and he needs to populate the world with his own seed. That's part of the religion. We were taught when we were children that we must protect our virginity with our lives, or we would be damned and suffer eternal damnation, that we must be virgins, that there was no other way. We must be virgins or we would be destroyed. Destroyed means killed to save your soul, that the blood of Jesus Christ did not save us. We would have to be literally sacrifice our lives to save our soul for a place in heaven. When I was 11 years old, I had a stepfather. He was 48. I was a little skinny 11-year-old girl. When I was alone with him and in his care, he beat me. He drugged me by the hair of my head till hair came out by the handfuls. He beat me, knocked out part of my eyebrow that's still terribly scarred today, cut me with a pocket knife, not to kill me, but to simply torture me. Small cuts, I still have the small cut knife wounds on my body today. He beat me so unmercifully, but I would not yield to him because I was told to protect my virginity with my life. Of course, I failed. I survived. I lived through it, unfortunately. And I was so badly damaged. My leg had been pulled out of the socket. He tied me to an iron bed and brought his weight down on me. My other arm, my opposite that leg, had been pulled out. My spine is real tweaked. If you saw an x-ray of my spine today, it's still very crooked. So for the rest of my life, I walked with one leg slightly longer than the other. But on the day that I was raped, when my mama came back, she didn't even look at me. The condition that I was in, I couldn't sit without leaving blood everywhere. There was blood on my face and blood on my arms from the small wounds of the knife. And Mama pretended that she didn't see me, that she didn't even notice. I realized looking back that she was in a state of shock. But then I felt deserted, powerless, and worthless. And they started quoting the scriptures. We have scriptures, the blood covenants. And I waited for my death. And in the days that followed, when I was locked alone in the room, or allowed to go outside, we lived way out in the country, there was no place to go, I would go out and pray. And I told God, I said, you created me, you can take my life if you want to. But if I live through this, there's only one thing I want to know. Why? Why would you want me to die for a sin that was committed on me? Why? If you let me live, I promise you, if you will give me wisdom, I'll have the courage. If you open the door for me, that I'll walk through it. I waited for days. The days turned into weeks. No one mentioned it. My mother's way of protecting me was to send me away. Instead of standing by me, she sent me away to live with someone else. I felt not worthy of life, not worthy of love, not worthy of anything. And at that time in my life, I thought I was an island. But since then, I have had many women in my own faith come to me and say that they were molested or raped when they were very young. Most of the women in the FLDS religion are married very young. But the men claim that it is such a sacred and holy religion, and the only reason they have sex is to have children. If that's so, why have so many of my nieces been raped when they were little girls, like me? There are many, and I'm not the only one speaking out. I'm not trying to paint a light on this particular cult or this particular religion as being any worse than other places in the world. I do feel that when there is an organization or a group of people or a culture that feels or believes that they have more rights, that some people have more rights than others because they're male, because they're white, because they have money, because they have power, because they have education, because they have anything, any reason or excuse they can feel to think that somebody else is less human than they are, to that degree of division, of that claiming to have more rights, is the same degree that you will find abuse in that culture, no matter what culture it is. The greater the division between those that have rights and those that do not, the greater the abuse. It's a statistical fact. So when you have people coming on and saying, oh, it's a man's right and it's nature to have all these wives, but if a wife is to have more than one mate in her life, she is evil and rotten, and it is so against nature and so unholy. That is not true. That is not true. If men were really as hot as they think they are sexually and call it their nature, why aren't they all prostitutes? This is totally unreasonable. I'm sure there are a lot of them that would like to be. I've been told that they would like to be by several guys. But being a man is not about breeding. A real man isn't a real man if there's nothing going on above the neck. A real man does the best he can with his knowledge and his wisdom and his understanding and his strength to make this a better world, not to hold somebody down and destroy him because he's the biggest. I do not understand where the challenge is for someone who is the biggest to put themselves in a position to persecute, control, manipulate, and rape someone who is the littlest and call themselves a man. That is the behavior of an animal, not a man. We are desperately in need of enlightenment. These people that behave this way do it because they condone it with their thinking in a culture that condones it. They are victimized themselves by their own ignorance, and they create generations of victimized people. I am 5th generation FLDS polygamist. I grew up in a culture where lying to the public was a way of life because we were taught that it was a good thing to do to protect the men of God. Lying about what went on in our homes. Lying about the abuse, the hunger, the loneliness, the nervous breakdowns, the number of suicides. Lying about a life in hell to obtain a life in heaven. And I learned very young, just through thinking about it, that if it was the same thing in heaven, I didn't want any part of it. When I was a child, our God was so mean, the devil was on unemployment and could only get a part-time job as a scapegoat. We didn't need him because our God was a bloodthirsty God. It is my intention to help people understand that abuse is abuse, no matter what you cloak it under. You cannot hide it in the name of religion. You cannot mask it in the name of power. You cannot justify it in the name of education or superiority. Abuse is abuse, and abuse anywhere and everywhere to anyone is just plain wrong.
Thank you, Rebecca. We appreciate you sharing your story with us.